Grandma, I'm going out today. Will you be okay on your own? Grandma is 85 years old. Though she's energetic, I still worry. What are you talking about? I'm still young. But recently, there have been frequent cases of aggressive door-to-door sales around here. If someone comes, just ignore them, okay? Don't worry. Who do you think I am? Grandma said that and waved at me. My name is Gabriel. I'm a 26-year-old office worker. I live with my parents, older brother, and grandmother, making 5 of us. My father and brother are office workers, while my mother is a part-time housewife, making sure my elderly grandmother isn't alone. Grandma has always been a strong, bold person, like a tough mother figure, so even though she says she's fine, I worry because she once fell and injured herself when alone. My parents, brother, and I all work shifts, so someone is usually home. But on this day, Grandma happened to be alone at home. I never expected it would turn out like that. 2 hours after I left home and while shopping, I received a message from Grandma addressed to the family. Grandma uses a senior-friendly smartphone that can handle phone calls and simple messages. A water purifier salesperson came by. I panicked at the message. My mother must still be at work, so Grandma should be alone. I had just heard about door-to-door salespeople being pushy in the neighborhood. I decided to head back quickly, rushing to the station and catching the next train. 30 minutes after receiving the message, I arrived home to find unfamiliar shoes at the entrance. They must belong to the salesperson. I hurriedly opened the living room door. Gabriel, welcome back. Grandma greeted me casually, sipping tea. The salesperson looked momentarily startled but then smiled at me, assessing that everything was fine based on my age and gender. The salesperson, a man in his 30s, spoke with a forced smile and was very familiar.
Your grandchild. How old? You might not know this because you're so young, but water plays a big role in health. We want to deliver the best water for your family.
Grandma seemed to be listening to the salesperson attentively. It seems they're checking the water quality around here. If the water at home is dirty, they'll leave a purifier for free. Grandma said this while looking at the salesperson. The salesperson then said,
Yes, exactly. Now, let's get started with the water quality test.
He stood up and went to the kitchen sink. After adding a chemical from his bag into a glass of water, the color quickly changed.
Look at this. The color has changed so much. This proves that the water is extremely dirty. You're not drinking this water, are you?
The salesperson was very intimidating towards me. We use a water dispenser. The salesperson pretended to be really concerned about our health. However, according to our water quality, even washing hands could lead to health issues. How dirty could our water be? The salesperson spread brochures on the table and started explaining about the free purifiers, concluding with this statement.
But the recommended one is this top-of-the-line purifier for $7,000.
What? I couldn't help but voice my surprise. Grandma was also shocked. Seeing this, the salesperson puffed out his chest as if to say he was ready for this reaction. He emphasized that this top-of-the-line purifier removes impurities to the extreme and is good for beauty and health. He even claimed that drinking this water cured diseases. Grandma's attitude changed. If it's that good, maybe we should consult with the family and think about it. The salesperson then said,
Actually, this is a special campaign and normally costs $10,000. If you decide to buy it now, it's only $7,000.
He promoted it like a TV shopping channel. I felt suspicious, but Grandma had apparently invited the salesperson in with the intention to buy. I need to install it on all the faucets, and I want 5 of them, so I told him to come inside. If it's such a great product, it should be cheap, right? The salesperson nodded cheerfully, but this was outrageous. Grandma, we definitely don't need 5. You can't just decide this on your own. But I'm the head of this house. When Grandma says something so firmly, she's not going to back down. But 5 purifiers costing $7,000 each. Grandma seemed stubborn. That's right, I'm the head of this house, so I don't need to consult with the family. The salesperson's eyes lit up.
Then, let's move on to the contract.
He placed what seemed like a contract on the table and instructed Grandma to write down her address and name, moving forward with the contract. I forcibly intervened. So, which company are you from? The salesperson looked down at me and laughed.
Oh, I didn't introduce myself to you, did I? I'm from the Water Bureau and am commissioned to conduct water quality tests.
He handed me a business card. It was a company I had never heard of, but the salesperson ignored me and continued making Grandma sign the contract. Are there no other documents for the contract? Also, just in case, we can cancel within a cooling-off period, right? The salesperson laughed through his nose.
There are other documents. Please read them later. Also, since this is a special campaign price, cooling off is not available.
What? As I was taken aback.
Cooling off applies to cases of unwanted sales. Your grandmother has clearly shown a willingness to buy, right? You can't just cancel everything. Being young doesn't excuse ignorance. You'll face problems if you don't learn.
He belittled me. But that's not true. The cooling-off period for door-to-door sales is 8 days. While this was happening, Grandma finished signing the contract. She was told that payment should be made in cash, so she left the room to get the money, leaving the salesperson waiting. During this time, the salesperson, saying he had no cash on hand today, began installing one purifier in the kitchen. After finishing the installation, Grandma came back with a thick paper bag. Could the cash be inside? We don't keep cash at home, but it might be Grandma's savings. As Grandma tried to hand the paper bag to the salesperson, the door opened, and my mother entered. The salesperson quickly bowed to my mother.
I was sent by the Water Bureau.
Mother's eyes seemed to flash for a moment, but she quickly smiled and asked about the situation. The salesperson explained the circumstances. Then, the door opened again. It was my father. The salesperson looked startled, reintroduced himself, and began explaining the purifier. Father made the salesperson explain in detail about impurities, the health benefits of the top-of-the-line purifier, and the basis for these claims. The salesperson, occasionally flustered, provided explanations. Tired, he finished explaining and said,
I'll come back tomorrow to install the remaining purifiers.
He took the paper bag Grandma had handed him and left quickly. As we went to see him off at the entrance, the door opened, and my older brother appeared. The salesperson, now wearing his shoes, looked up and was startled again.
Oh. A guest?
He blocked the salesperson's way. The salesperson again handed out his business card.
I'm from the Water Bureau and was commissioned.
How many times do I have to hear the name of this salesperson's company? The salesperson tried to leave, but my brother blocked him.
Were you trying to sell us something? This isn't some scam, is it?
The salesperson, looking flustered, said.
Absolutely not. It's a formal contract, so don't worry.
My brother, who trains at the gym and works as a trainer, has a physique that the weak-looking salesperson couldn't confront. The salesperson seemed to agree, giving a forced smile and attempting to leave, but my brother wasn't letting him go. The salesperson, who had already turned pale, returned to the living room.
The first person who came back was Gabriel, right?
I nodded in response to my brother's question. The salesperson, surrounded by my family, reluctantly sat down. I began explaining calmly. I was told this person was commissioned by the water department. The water department, or was it that direction? Not from the water department itself, but from that direction, right? That's a classic scam line. I pointed to where the water department was located. The salesperson's forced smile froze. They claimed it was a water quality test. This person took a sample of our water, added chemicals, and the color changed. They said our water was dirty. But it's the kind that changes color with anything, isn't it? As I continued, the salesperson's eyes darted around. At first, they said they'd give us a water purifier for free, but then recommended the top-of-the-line purifier for $7,000 because our water was so dirty. But normally it's $10,000, and now it's discounted due to a campaign, right? I looked directly at the salesperson, who nodded, looking even more nervous. They said the contract details would be explained later, but we can't cool off because it's a campaign price. Isn't that right? The salesperson, looking ready to flee, nodded. They said our tap water would make us sick if we washed vegetables with it, let alone drank it. The top-of-the-line purifier supposedly removes impurities to the extreme, with reports of curing diseases just from drinking it. But this purifier was discontinued about 5 years ago due to problems. I pointed at the purifier the salesperson had installed. The salesperson's face turned even paler.
That's not true. Please don't lie.
But I was confident. It's not a lie. It's well known in the industry. Oh, I work here. I handed the salesperson my business card. The salesperson's face grew even more ashen. I wondered if a person's face could turn so pale. I worked for a well-known manufacturer of water dispensers. I had studied water quality testing in college, so I knew the salesperson's explanations were mostly nonsense. Furthermore, the industry is rife with unscrupulous sales practices, and I often hear about it. It seemed the salesperson had unwittingly targeted our home. Perhaps they thought it would be easy to deceive only my grandmother. They never expected to encounter someone who worked in the industry. By the way, my father is a skilled salesman. When he returned and questioned the salesperson, It was to expose any fraudulent elements. With a pale face and unable to argue, the salesperson was met by my mother, who took out her smartphone. It had recorded all interactions with the salesperson since her return. Mother had suspected fraud from the moment she received grandmother's message and had come prepared. The ambiguous reference to "from the water department" had confirmed her suspicions. Grandmother, while showing the recording to the salesperson, said, "You deceived the elderly in the neighborhood and sold them expensive water purifiers, didn't you? Isn't this fraud?" The salesperson, with a hoarse voice, replied,
"But the contract is valid."
In a way, I admired their persistence. Still, this was fraud. I spoke up. Neighbors who were deceived have only had their issues in the past few days. You said cooling off isn't possible, but it actually is, isn't it? Also, the contract documents don't have the details or even the address of your company. This won't hold up. I had received thorough training at work to be cautious with contracts, especially given the prevalence of fraudulent practices in the industry. This salesperson had entered a realm far beyond a gray zone. It was outright fraud. It's amazing you can call this a proper contract. I've learned a lot about how malicious operators work from this. Claiming to be from the water department would be illegal. Saying you came from that direction is a loophole you exploit. The salesperson, seemingly drained of any rebuttal, looked at me with vacant eyes. Not properly explaining the contract and forcing a signature is unacceptable. Is your company the one that sold the discontinued purifier? I thought it had gone under, but perhaps it's just rebranded? If so, are you trying to sell unusable purifiers at high prices to recover losses? I recall that company was a new entrant. I doubt you're the CEO, but maybe it's family run? I speculated on a whim and, apparently, hit the mark. The salesperson, with tears in their eyes, admitted that their father was the CEO of that company. It was a small company that had fallen on hard times, and they had reluctantly turned to door-to-door sales. Hearing this, our family couldn't help but laugh. Falling on hard times doesn't justify fraud. And those tears are probably fake. After all, if you were really struggling, you wouldn't be driving around in a luxury car. That car parked at the corner, that's yours, isn't it? I had noticed a luxury car parked at the corner of the street when I came home. It stood out, and when the salesperson tried to leave, I confirmed they used a remote to unlock it. Seeing someone who's scamming to the point they can afford a luxury car was infuriating. Grandmother had heard from neighbors about similar scams and was aware of people crying over being duped. But they had no addresses or contact information, so they had no choice but to endure. When the salesperson arrived at our home, Grandmother had a hunch and decided to take action. Having often said she would deal with any door-to-door salespeople herself, she sent us the message, prompting us to return home quickly. Thanks to Mother's quick thinking with the recording, the so-called top-of-the-line purifier, the inadequate contract documents, these were all enough evidence of fraud. Grandmother called the neighbors, and they came over quickly. Seeing the salesperson's face and hearing the accusations of fraud, they agreed to call the police. The salesperson was apprehended for the crime of fraud. The situation turned into quite a commotion, but within a few days, all the victims in the neighborhood had their money returned. The salesperson was reportedly arrested for fraud, though we didn't hear what happened afterward. By the way, Grandma, you should stop keeping cash hidden in the house. I suddenly remembered and mentioned this to Grandma, who looked puzzled. You handed over a paper bag with money, right? How much was inside? Grandma, as if remembering, went out of the room and quickly returned with the paper bag in hand. I opened it and burst out laughing. Inside the bag was a bundle of comic magazines wrapped in furoshiki. When I asked her what she had planned if it was immediately discovered, Grandma replied, I was going to passionately recommend these as my favorites. Indeed, it was a magazine Grandma had been reading for years. If worse came to worst, I thought I could just pretend to be senile. Grandma said this with a smile. I was reassured that she was still as sharp as ever. Our home was filled with laughter again. How did you like this story? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.